Actually, what I'm going to talk today about is largely to do with stress and how that affects our performance at work, how it affects our psychophysiological resilience, and how that can lead to certain mishaps, certain errors, such as leaving your reading glasses at home. So thank goodness for chemists. Right. What I'm going to do today is just sort of give you an overview of autogenic training. I can imagine the majority of you here may not have heard of autogenic training before. It's a very popular technique that's used in the workplace and in mental health settings in various countries around the world. 3 most notably are in Germany, Japan and Russia, and it is spreading around the world as well. The profile's increasing because it is backed by over 3,000 clinical studies worldwide showing its benefits for the organisation, and in particular showing its benefits for you as an individual in terms of building up your mental health, in building up your psychological, neurological and physiological resilience. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about the technique, and so that you can better relate to it, we're going to have a little bit of a hands-on demonstration as well. It's no good me here today presenting you with just the theory of a technique and you walking away from the conference thinking, but how does it work? I don't really understand why it would be good for us. You really need a personal experience of the technique. I'm going to do I'm going to focus particularly on a case study with NASA. Now NASA, the National Aeronautical Space Engineering, has been conducting autogenic training now for almost 2 decades, and their research arm, the Ames Research Centre, is regularly doing research on autogenic training, and to date they have a lot of evidence as to how it's very beneficial in building the psychological and physiological resilience of astronauts and pilots, particularly necessary given that there's no room for error in their work, and also because with NASA, if there's an accident, it's going to be a catastrophic one. So I'm going to spend some time looking at that. First of all, let's talk about resilience. What is resilience? Well, resilience is really the ability to be able to tolerate disturbance. If you can tolerate disturbance, if you can tolerate stressors, then you're more able to adapt, to adjust, to persist, to be motivated, less likely to make errors and so forth. So resilience of your workforce is vital, very, very important. It underpins performance and it underpins your return on investment in the mining industry as well. Underlying resilience is how your workforce manages their stress response. This is fundamental to mental health, to resilience of all forms. How do we better manage stress? If your workers are unable to manage their stress well, it will break down their resilience. They won't feel well, they won't think well, they won't be able to work well. And when you have a scenario like that, you're more likely to have error, you're more likely to have injury. There will be a lot of costs associated for your organisation. Now, one thing I think it's really important to emphasise is all the good work that the mining industry is doing in trying to work out what aspects within the organisation they can control or manipulate to help the mental health of the workforce and to prevent errors from occurring. The problem is, even though you can control some of these things to a certain extent, it really comes down to the individual's mental ability to withstand disturbance, to be resilient, to be able to really to be able to confirm that you'll be getting the return on investment that you're looking for. There was a speaker yesterday that talked about the individual being the wild card. So what kind of techniques, what kind of training can you implement in your organisation to actually strengthen the workforce so that they're no longer your wild card, so that you can eliminate the chance of error, you can eliminate those sick days, absenteeism, presenteeism. We're all human beings, you're not going to be able to eliminate it totally, but you can certainly make movements in the right way. We must understand the human condition is not fixed, and this is the great news. There are wonderful techniques out there, such as autogenic training, that can help in making your workforce more resilient. Now, some of these statistics were covered yesterday by Dr. Jennifer Bowers. Suffice to say, everyone who works in the mining industry is a normal human being, and as a result, there's nothing confusing about what kind of mental health problems you might have in your workforce. 1 in 5 people in Australia will suffer a significant mental health problem this year. That's a fact. Because the mining industry is a high-risk industry in some respects, harsh environmental climates, sometimes there's isolation from significant social support, etc., you can be pretty sure that 1 in 5, if not more, in your organisation will be needing some kind of technique, some kind of training to help boost their psychophysiological resilience. Someone with a mental health problem is 41% more likely to have an accident at work, and they're more likely to be less productive. In fact, a recent study that's come out of Canada has said they're 27.9% less productive. So the ability of your workforce to be able to become resilient, have techniques, have training to boost their resilience, will underpin their mental health and will also ultimately be able to boost their performance at work. Prevention is far better than treatment. Now, a lot of mining companies are doing wonderful things. They're connected to an employee assistance program, which is great. But I will alert you to this. EAP is after the fact. When a worker in your company is already exhibiting mental health problems, then they go to the EAP psychologist. Let's look at techniques that are simple and effective, that are focusing on prevention, and let's treat every human being as being somebody who can be weakened by day-to-day stress. We can all relate to it. This morning I forgot my reading glasses. Now, if I'd had really bad eyesight and I didn't get to a chemist, that could have been a bit awkward on the stage here today. So let's work out how we can train people to maintain good functioning or to help with dysfunctional functioning. Right, now I'd like to now actually get into about autogenic training. Autogenics is a word that comes from a German word meaning generated within. It was developed by a professor of neuropathology and neuropsychiatry in Germany, and he started working on the notion of autogenics from the 1930s onwards. He's only recently died. Over decades, in a university environment, he and his academic team worked to put together a technique where you could consciously control your nervous system. You could self-regulate your nervous system, which means the autonomy that we have is that we have a tool to take home or to use at work to help calm down the stress response, to help us repair, to help us rejuvenate, to help us withstand disturbance, to boost our psychophysiological resilience. As I mentioned, it's backed by over 3,000 clinical studies worldwide, and those studies are studies that are appearing in reputable journals on behaviour, health promotion, and so forth. And if anyone would like to get some access or have links to some of that research, by all means, come to me later on, and I'll give you links to that research. Now, what is autogenic training? It's actually just a series of very, very simple mental exercises that we learn to do whenever we want, where we talk to our body, we give mental instructions to our body to calm down our nervous system so that the internal brain-body processes are able to move into a gear which creates a regeneration in our mind and our body, enabling us to focus, to be alert, to think clearly, to be good decision makers, to be good problem solvers, to be calm, to focus on things in a considered way. It's taught over 4 to 6 hours, and you can shorten that or lengthen that depending on the demographic. But as a general rule of thumb, we say we teach the technique in 4 to 6 hours. It's perfect in a workshop format, and it can be done one-on-one or in a group. So in a group setting, of course, it's very cost effective as well. I mentioned about the conscious control of what goes on in the brain and the body. So with autogenic training, we turn on the relaxation response at will. We learn to turn off the stress response at will. And we turn on the repair mechanisms of the brain and body at will, leading to greater resilience. On the right-hand side here, you see some of the many benefits of autogenic training. There's been a lot of work by a neuroscientist called McIlchrist into autogenic training, and it has been proven to improve brain function. Now, when we're stressed, what happens is there's a blood movement that moves between the hemispheres of the brain. Whilst we're having a normal degree of stress, to alert us, to enable us to focus on the problems that we have at hand, to work meaningfully, that's great. But if that goes on for a long period of time at a high level and we don't know how to turn down, what happens is the stress begins to undermine our brain function, which in turn begins to undermine our performance, as you can well imagine. The right prefrontal cortex ends up having a disproportionate amount of blood flowing to that side of the brain. Now, the left prefrontal cortex, the left side of our brain, requires an equal level of blood flow in order for us to be alert, to be able to concentrate, to focus on detail. If we have long periods of stress without knowing how to turn that stress response down, or if we're somebody who innately is not very resilient and we haven't been taught the tools to turn down our stress response, then the problem is with that disproportionate amount of blood flowing to the right prefrontal cortex, there's a negative looping that occurs. And the negative looping affects our ability to concentrate, to focus. It makes us very emotional. It makes us lose attention to detail. And it makes us overreactive or underreactive. And on a mine site where you have to have your wits about you because you're there with long shifts, you're operating heavy machinery, or even if you're in upper management working for a mine site and you've got all the complexities, all the administration and the management complexities that goes on in a mining operation, not knowing how to calm yourself down, turn down the stress response, will affect your performance. There is no doubt about that. And as I said about the employee assistance program, it's great, but that kicks in when your workforce is already suffering. So let's look at what we can start off with that's all about prevention. These are just some obvious company benefits here. I know that as a company, you're regularly thinking about return on investment with improved productivity, less absenteeism and less presenteeism and so forth. Well, clearly, if you can build up I always have trouble saying that, psychophysiological resilience, you are actually making a move towards greater productivity. And that was borne out by that research that I mentioned a moment ago from Canada. Okay, who's passionate about autogenic training other than me? Well, we've got NASA. 2 decades of training their astronauts and pilots in autogenic training to help with resilience means that, they're seeing results. I've spent many years working with New South Wales Police, and I'm going to talk a tiny bit about that today because I see a kind of an overlap between the police and the mining organisation in terms of it being male-dominated, high risk and so forth. So I thought that might be kind of interesting for you, just having a little look at the New South Wales Police Force case study as well. Now, Kyoto University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in Japan, has set up a Department of Human Behaviour and Health Promotion autogenic training facility because of all the good work that they're finding, all the good results they're finding with autogenic training. We've got some Olympic teams around the world, namely the German Olympic team that uses autogenic training to boost the performance of their Olympic team. There are a few medical schools around the world, including a couple of medical schools in both Japan and UK that I know of, and the Autogenic Training Institute of Australia. Okay, let's look at autogenics now, and I'm going to actually now get you all to do a little, not an experiment, to partake in a little demonstration to show how you can consciously control your nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that kicks into gear when we're stressed. We all know that stress can be good because it makes us attend to things and get things done. But we also know that stress is bad when there's too much stress or when we're not resilient enough to deal with the stress and when we don't know how to turn our stress response down so we can rest, repair and regenerate. With the autonomic nervous system, you've got your sympathetic nervous system and you've got your parasympathetic nervous system. And it's a little bit like this. So when the stress response kicks in, the sympathetic nervous system sets in, and that's when the stress hormones are released in our body, acting on the brain, acting on every single cell in your body. Now, if that goes on for too long, and if that is turned up too high, I hate to tell you this, but then there begins to be an atrophy, a death of brain cells on the left side of your brain, which is pretty scary. Not only that, as I mentioned, it becomes a disproportionate amount of blood flowing from the left to the right brain. And the immune system is impaired, so we're more likely to fall ill. We're more likely to get a response to allergies. We're more likely to fall to a disease state. So we have an impaired immune system if we don't know how to rest, repair and regenerate. It affects our functioning, affects our morale. We can become irritable. We can become fatigued. There's a long, long list there of things that happen if we don't know how to rest, repair and regenerate. So what we want to do is we want to consciously control that part of the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, to turn up the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the wonderful part of the nervous system where you switch off. You turn off the noisy mind. You go to bed, you fall asleep straight away and you don't wake up again. You wake up feeling refreshed, energized. The problem is most people do not know how to switch off. It's all very good to say, in an education program, let's just say you bring into your organisation someone to talk about good sleep hygiene. You tell your workforce you need to go to bed at night or you need to sleep really well during the day. How do they sleep if no one's ever taught them how to switch off? How do you feel energised if your sympathetic nervous system is always switched on to high? We find with the sympathetic nervous system, all sorts of things happen. Your heart rate goes up, and that sends extra blood and oxygen to your muscles where you need it. The muscles tense up, and you're ready for the fight-flight response. It doesn't have to be a really serious thing that makes you go into fight-flight mode. It can simply be that you've got a deadline to meet, or that you remembered it's your partner's it's the anniversary and you haven't bought a present yet, and you've got a list to do. That will send the sympathetic nervous system right up into fight-flight mode. What happens is blood moves away from the skin and we feel a little bit colder. Our hands might feel a little bit cool, our feet feel a little bit cool. We might start to sweat in our palms or under our arms because of all the energy that's required to keep us in this fight mode. It's all about stamina and endurance. It's exhausting. We've got to start taking the load off those organs. We've got to start improving our breathing, our blood flow, etc. And the only way of doing that is to turn down the sympathetic nervous system and to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system instead. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you all to put down your pens and don't text on your mobile phones. Excellent. And I'm just going to ask you all to just put your hands onto you might have to move your chairs out, put your hands onto your thighs. And as you look at your hands, turn your hands palms up and look at the palms. Look at the colours of your palms. I'm going to condition you all to connect your brain to your body. Have your eyes open and look at the colour in your palms. And just notice how your palms feel. And as I speak, you may notice there was a slight change where they became more pink or blotchy. You might have noticed a reddening in the fingertips. And the blotchiness is something that I would say most of you are noticing now. And what is happening is simply by focusing on your hands, you're already starting to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. You're turning down the stress response. The pinkness in your hands, the increased pinkness, and there might be warmth for some of you. There might be a sensation of swelling or heaviness. For true novices, it might take a little bit of practice, but most people tend to have one of those feelings, or tingling even. And what that means is immediately by turning down the sympathetic nervous system, you're redirecting the blood flow from your muscles, where they are tense, to your extremities. Now, there's increased blood flow to the extremities in the relaxation response. And blood will only go there when certain other things happen in your brain and your body. When your breathing starts to slow down, because we don't need as much oxygen in our muscles anymore. The blood's moving away from the muscles. When the heart rate slows down, so blood pressure starts to slow down. There's less energy needs on the liver to release sugar to sustain energy for that fight-flight response. It all begins, step one, very simple. You just focus on your hands and the way they feel. And now we can close our eyes if you feel comfortable, and staying connected to your hands, silently speak to your hands and say, hands, heavy and warm. Heavy and warm. Heavy and warm. Just opening your eyes, and I want you to be honest with me. If you're feeling either a little bit of tingling or warmth or heaviness, more so than before, could you put up your hand? Great. That's a very risky thing to ask. If no one put up their hand, I'd look like a blooming idiot. Okay. Great. So do you know what? Actually, what you did, as simple as it seems, don't underestimate the power of that act, because you consciously controlled your autonomic nervous system. Now, that's just the very beginning. Now, with autogenic training, we look at the hands, we focus on the feet, the arms, the legs, the heart, the breathing and the forehead. And incidentally, the world's leading migraine specialist uses autogenic training to treat stress-related migraine headache. It's all about blood flow for the migraine specialists, because they've shown that with migraine, stress-related migraine, part of the pain receptors are set off by heavy dilation of the blood vessels in the brain. And when we're stressed, the blood doesn't just go to the muscles, it goes to the head as well. So by returning the blood flow to where it should be when the relaxation response is in motion, it reduces that heavy dilation in the brain, and it's not activating the pain receptors as much. I've also had great results actually with my police officers in helping those with various things like migraine, alcohol addictions, and chronic pain. Some of them have pain injuries, as I'm sure some of your people would have with the musculoskeletal problems you face in the mining industry. So really it's, yes, autogenic training is about prevention, but it's also great for treatment as well. Okay. Now let's talk about NASA, the National Aeronautical Space Agency. They set up a life sciences experiment called the 16SLJ Life Science Experiment. And initially, this experiment was conducted with the Space Shuttle Endeavour crew, which incidentally, there were quite a few crews over the years with the Endeavour. There have been a few missions where they've called it the Space Endeavour. And their objective was to help astronauts and pilots adapt psychologically and physiologically to space travel. You can go onto the Ames Research Centre website, that's the research arm of NASA, to look into some of the research they've done on autogenic training and how it's helped with the performance and with the mental health of their people. With the autogenic training, they actually trained people with autogenic training for 4 to 6 hours. And that's what I mentioned. It's a 4 to 6 hour program. It's as quick as that. It's as simple as that. And training was effective within 4 to 6 hours in 85% of the astronauts and military pilots tested. Now that's pretty astounding. There are as a psychologist, we have a lot of techniques, a lot of tools we can use that are evidence-based. One of them, the most popular and common technique we use, is called cognitive behavioural therapy, which you've probably heard. Now, it's highly effective, but it takes a damn long time to change people's thinking and behaviour. With autogenic training, there's no need to talk. You don't have to talk about your feelings. You don't have to reflect. And actually, some people will not talk about their feelings, and some people do not reflect very well. And that's where cognitive behavioural therapy has its limitations. With autogenic training, particularly in the male demographic, they like autogenic training because it's methodical, it's prescriptive. They don't have to talk about feelings. They feel comfortable doing it. It makes sense, it makes logical sense to them. So for a male-dominated industry, it's even more suited for that very reason. Autogenic training, now this will interest you because, you know, as I said, the research in NASA has been going on for about 2 decades now. So they've found lots of wonderful results with autogenic training. It was effective at reducing physiological arousal as a treatment for motion sickness, at improving psychomotor performance, at improving crew coordination, improving crew communication. They also found that it was effective at replacing pharmacological methods for a variety of disorders, but without the side effects of medication. Now, this is borne out by lots of studies around the world using randomised trials, autogenic training. Someone has been diagnosed with clinical depression or an anxiety disorder. Let's give this group autogenic training. We'll give this group medication, and this group no treatment at all. And guess what? Autogenic training has been proven time and time again to be equally as effective as a treatment of some of these mental disorders as psychopharmacological interventions, and sometimes it's more effective, but without the side effects. Now, why does NASA go crazy about autogenic training, and why do I go crazy about autogenic training? First of all, it's based on science, big tick. It's scientifically measurable. With the improvement in scanning techniques today, we can actually measure in action the changes before and after autogenic training. We can measure the immune system fluctuations before a session of autogenic training. They measure a T cell count, which are the cells in your body that fight off infection, fight off viral complaints, bacterial infection. And then at the end of the autogenic training session, say 15 minutes later after you do the little exercise at home, in the research laboratories, they find out that your T cell count has gone up. You're functioning better from head to toe. It's an inside-out process. No talking about feelings. It's easy and quick to learn, cost-effective. We can do it in a group. Immediate results, and the results become more profound with more practice, of course. When I say immediate results, it's one of these things. It's like learning a very, very easy language. But to be fluent, you need a little bit of practice. A lot of practice for some people. It has demonstrable, far-reaching neuropsychological, physiological, and performance benefits. It's autonomous. When you're feeling stressed, you don't have to ring up your psychologist and say, "Can I have some therapy, please?" Or you don't have to take a day off work to recover in the quietness of your own home, or on the toilet seat at work in the cubicle for 5 minutes, or by the coffee machine. You sit down, you can do it when with a little bit of practice, you can get a major response in 5 minutes. And you've rested yourself, you've repaired yourself, you've boosted your energy levels for the 12-hour shift ahead of you. Now, I'm just going to race through a little bit with the police. Now, as I mentioned, I just want to talk about the police because I feel it's something that, the mining companies can relate to. There are some similarities there. Now, I had the pleasure to work with New South Wales Police between 1994 and 2006. And it was funded by them, the autogenic training, and also workers' compensation. Now, it's a little bit like an EAP person, if that makes sense. The police it wasn't about prevention. The police already were exhibiting some kind of mental health issues, and then they came to see me. And they came to see me with a whole range of issues, most notably depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, alcohol issues, stress disorders. With police stressors, I've just listed here some of the job contents stressors that were obvious with the police that I saw. Dangerous people and situations, critical incidents and other crime, public animosity, dealing with death on job, including death of colleagues, breaking bad news, dealing with others' grief, and the issues associated with shift work. Then there are job context stressors, internal complaint system, internal affairs. I've had a few police officers, unbeknownst to them, they were being monitored, they had bugs in their houses, and they were blacklisted because a particular friend may have had some misdemeanour, and then it was like guilty by association. They found that very stressful. Royal commissions that come up from time to time, often higher up in the organisation. I could get shot for saying this, but they try and find scapegoats further down in the organisation, but that has happened. And issues with gender vilification and discrimination. Disgruntled male colleagues when their female colleague gets a promotion and they don't get the promotion, and that has caused quite a few issues within the New South Wales Police Force. Now, with the people I see, I always, one-on-one, I always like to do a pre-assessment and a post-assessment so I can demonstrate to myself whether there have been positive shifts in the psychological states of my clients. I see that as a very responsible and important thing to do. My objective was to assist them with their mental health problem. And I had an indirect objective, and that was to help them function better, which meant a return to work. But it was never my intention to focus as a main objective on them returning to work. But obviously that was a byproduct of the autogenic training. The results, and this is very general, but overwhelmingly significant symptom reduction, positive shifts in morale and thinking. 100% of police officers always reported feeling more in control and calmer, and in less enduring cases, speedy return to work. Now, once again, as I said, as a psychologist, I have a lot of techniques up my sleeve that are evidence-based, but I will say this about the autogenic training. Time and time again, I get phone calls from clients that I saw 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, to let me know how effective autogenic training still is for them. Thank you so much. It's made such a difference to my life. And, maybe, I'm sure other health professionals also get clients ringing up saying, thank you, I appreciate it, just wanted to say hello. But the one thing that resonates is always autogenic training this, autogenic training that. And that's great feedback. That's very heartening. Now, this works for miners too. And I actually want to sort of finish off by saying something. For the last couple of years, I've been presenting at a few mining conferences in occupational health and safety, and I've been networking. And I've noticed, and this has also been something that has openly been discussed with me from people in health and safety in the mining industry, that they tend to be bogged down at the top level, bogged down with bureaucracy, bogged down with this overwhelming need to prove return on investment, bogged down with administration, and bogged down with just that sense of, if I put this mental health program out there and roll it out, I'm going to be in big trouble if I can't prove return on investment. So what I've been told by people in occupational health and safety is they actually get scared of making decisions. And they spend so much time on the thinking and the research about what to implement that there's not much time and money left to actually implement strategies. So what I want to say is this, that if you're looking for a technique about prevention to boost the psychophysiological resilience in your workforce, trust the research that's out there where it has worked for other demographics in other industries. Oh my God. I think my 40 minutes are up. I thought someone was ringing me. I didn't realise my stopwatch did that. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel. I finally got to the punchline. Don't reinvent the wheel. That if it has been tested across a whole range of demographics, across a whole range of countries, In the mining industry, you're still human beings. It will work for you too. Don't be afraid. Now, I was speaking the other day to someone very high up in Rio Tinto in occupational health and safety, and they agreed with me about this feeling of being bogged down with this top-level down approach, and they get so stuck up the top, they don't implement mental health strategies. They get scared, they get tired, they run out of money, they've got to prove return on investment, they've got to do pilot studies, and the pilot studies they've got are earmarked for the following year, the year after. She said to me, she finds that the best thing to do is to find an evidence-based mental health strategy and start it off in a small mine or in one office around Australia. Test the results, and then if it works, roll it out across the board. And she said, that's not rocket science, that's what works for me. But she's finding that message hard to get through to those who are more caught up in bureaucracy. So it's just a little word of advice there. Maybe free up your thinking a little bit. The last thing I'd like to say is if within the mining organisation you haven't hired psychologists internally, consider that as an option as well. I think the mining industry is really good at hiring fitness instructors and physiotherapists, occupational therapists. I even know quite a few people in occupational health and safety in the mining industry now who've come from finance. And I mean, that's all great. Everyone's, got a part to play. But when you've got the Work Health and Safety Act, and we now understand that mental health is a really important part of that, you really do need to be thinking about the role of psychologists within your organisation so that they can assess the culture. They can see what the blocks are, they can see what the needs are, and then they themselves, even if they're not the ones implementing the mental health strategies in a one-on-one fashion, at least they can scrutinise some of the mental health techniques that are out there that are being promoted to your organisation to assess which ones are really based on science, which ones are really going to appeal to our demographic, and discard the others. Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. I think I've got a lot of good eye contact, so I feel good about that, but you can tell me if I've misread you later on. And thank you for your time. And if there are questions or answers, please go ahead. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Can you put the